You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Greg Helton today. Greg is out there in the great state of Washington. He's a listener of the show and also a few other things. He's an Army veteran, a writer, an artist. He's a YouTuber as well, and he's had some interesting things happen in the Bigfoot subject over the years in a few different states. So welcome to the show, Greg. How are you doing today, sir?
Pretty good. It's a nice, beautiful morning up here finally. Normally it's nice and gray and overcasted and rainy, but it's actually sunny and shiny today.
That is great. And yeah, that's probably when you get those days out there in the Pacific Northwest, you want to definitely not take them for granted. We're thankful that you're choosing to spend some time with us today here on the show, but I know a little bit about your accounts, and from what I know, Greg, they sound extremely interesting. I'd like to make the best use of our time today. Feel free to take us back to when this whole deal started for you. What was the first thing that you had experienced?
My first experience, I was 10 years old, and I was living in a little town called Manitou Springs, Colorado. A beautiful little town, nestled right at the Rocky Mountains, one mountain from Pikes Peak, and there's a canyon called Williams Canyon. And if you Google YouTube pterodactyl rides, that's the video, that's the canyon that they swing over. But I was 10 years old, and my mom let me climb all over the mountain as long as I wasn't causing trouble in the streets. So I'm sitting there climbing along and was up in the Williams Canyon, and I was grabbing slate rock and throwing them down off one of the cliffs. Didn't really think about it until the third rock I threw down, because there was a movement to my left in the peripheral vision, and I look over, and there's a young, slender, I'm thinking maybe 6 foot tall female Sasquatch holding like an infant, right, or 1 or 2 year old, and she's trying to push him up into one of these caves so they're out of the way of having rocks chucked onto them. And it tripped me out because I seen The Legend of Boggy Creek when I was a little kid, and so instantly recognized what they were, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then to my right, and I'm like hip deep in the bushes basically, and to my right, these bushes started shaking violently. Now, knowing animals growing up in Colorado and learning all the animals over there, I know no animal shakes bushes just to shake a bush. Only 2 things do that. That'd be a human or a primate, and that's to scare the heck out of you. So that was pretty intense right there, and I ran away. I was 10 years old. And then the next sighting was a few years later, and me and my 2 buddies, Greg Del Piano and Sean Flanagan, decided we were going to go camping for the night, right? And we packed up our stuff, and we hiked along Bar Trail, which is at the southwest end of Manitou Springs, and there's like a train track that goes up to the top of Pikes Peak called the Cog Railway. And we basically camped right near there. We found this little pool that's by about 6 feet deep. It's because there's a natural creek running down the area that we were camping at. And we were sitting there as a couple of kids and talk about girls and stuff like that. Got really dark and late at night, and so we decided to go to bed. Right now, we only had one of the little pump tents that you have that was triangular, not the kind that are domed everywhere. And so it was Greg on the right, Sean on the left, and I was in the middle. And we had left the zipper opened, right, so air can flow through and we won't get drizzled by dew. and the fire had died down, and then the fire got rekindled, and that's what woke me up. And I looked down at my feet, and there's this huge shadow covering the entire tent, right? And I looked down, and there's these two gigantic hairy legs between us and the campfire. And I was like, oh, gosh. And I knew they weren't bears, bear legs, because bears are stubby little things. And I shook my two friends awake and then put my hands over their mouths because one of them made a sound, and the legs turned. And we were all three laying down. The next thing I know, it's about 11 in the morning-ish. So it's been several hours. And we all three were in the sitting position with our backs pressed against the tent. So the only thing I'm thinking is the Sasquatch probably looked into the tent, scared us to death, and we all just fainted. I got out of the tent. My friend Greg got out of the tent, and he was so anxious to just get out of the area. Like, he was like throwing stuff all together. My friend Sean, he wouldn't even get out of the tent. He was that terrified. And we had to basically drag the tent off of him. And Sean was from New York City, and his mom sent him to his dad in Colorado to get him away from all the gangs in the 1980s. And basically the next day I go to see Sean to talk about it, and his dad had to send him home to New York City because Sean thought it would be safer to be in New York City than in Colorado with the Bigfoot. And my friend Greg, he literally refused to talk about it. He was that terrified. I did have one possible encounter when I was a teen in the same city. I don't know if it was actually Sasquatch or not, because what I did not see was solid black. And I'm walking a girl home up in Crystal Hills. And as I'm walking back home, there's this large, I think it was a Rottweiler, right? And he's not on a leash. And I think he's like on his way home or something. And he sees me, but doesn't even worry about me, right? And then all of a sudden he goes out of the street light lamp, from under the street light, and he looks to his right and freaks out, and he goes running and hides behind me. And I was just like, and I heard something shuffle. So we do have black bears, but generally when a dog sees a black bear, they start barking. When the Sasquatches come around, a lot of dogs just freaking shut up and run away. Okay, then we'll go to, that was my Colorado incidences. Then I went to the Army, and then I moved to Oregon shortly afterwards. And I was up in the Regency apartments up by COCC, Central Oregon Community College. And I was with a friend, and we see this large mass walking across like our window. And that was like one of the things. So it looked like a Sasquatch in the shadow, but it didn't make a sound. And where its head would have had to have been about 8 feet high from where we were, and the wind, how far the window is off the ground. But most of my sightings were over on the western side of Oregon. Most of them were actually in Lane County. One of them, I was driving home from a friend of mine's house in Marcola, and they actually have a big history of Sasquatches walking through the creeks in their town. It's a really tiny rural town. And I'm driving home, and it's twilight, and I see something. For some reason, my brain thought it was a broken telephone pole because it was half the size of the actual telephone pole. So it wasn't the 50-foot telephone poles. This one was probably about 25 at the most. And I'm like, oh, they replaced the telephone pole. And that was what stuck in my head for a split second. As I'm driving past, I realized it wasn't the telephone pole. It was a Sasquatch just standing there quietly waiting for the few cars to pass by before it walks across the road. And as it passed behind my van, I looked behind over my left shoulder, And I see it walking up to this barbed wire fence. And I went there the day afterwards, and the barbed wire fence is like up to my hip, and I'm 6'1". And this barbed wire fence was at its knees. That's how big it was. It just stepped over like it was nothing and just kept going. And that was a freaky one on my point, because it was only just a few miles from Springfield, Oregon. It was really weird. Then I was up in the Shotgun Creek area of the Weyerhaeuser Tree Farm area, which is right by Marcola. And I just witnessed or watched and investigated this Bronco had been overturned in this area. And I went through that area several times, and the Bronco had been flipped off the road, like something came to the side of it and flipped it off the road. And when I investigated the first time, the window looked like someone had put a shotgun up to the windshield from the inside and fired out. And this thing had been rolled off the thing because of the way the tracks were. You could just see the pivots in the dirt where something just flipped the truck off the road. And I go back there a couple days later, and now the Bronco is another 100 yards into the woods and had been flipped over a 3-foot thick fallen tree. So that freaked me out a little bit, but I kept going. And so I go to this one area, and I was just like, okay, this is a good area. I see some trees here. There's a fallen tree over here. I'm going to put up an apple trap. And something just told me this was like a really good spot. And this happened almost every time I had my Sasquatch experiences in Oregon. And so I noticed as I got out that there was these large footsteps imprints in the grass going from the clearing where I was to where the fallen tree was, right? And I had a hop from one step to the other, and it looked like something had literally broke a lot of the branches off underneath and slept there. And I was just like, that's interesting. So I go over to the other area to go have my apple trap between these trees. One of them is a really large pine tree. I think it's like a ponderosa pine tree. And there was another one, and then there was a smaller pine tree that was just covered in moss. And it was surrounded by manzanita bushes. But when I walked under there was a ton of baby pine nettles branches. Someone went to another pine tree and broke these off because the pine nettles are really soft, and had laid them out like a matting, right? And you could see in the impressions that there were 2 small humanoid impressions and 2 large impressions, all like in the fetal position. Now, deer don't do that. Deer won't collect stuff and put it down into a nest. The only thing I know that does that is large primates. I took a few pictures, but the camera I had was like everything was blurry because it was a horrible piece of junk camera. But so I went and started doing the apple trap just to the south of that tree where the other 2 were. And I was hearing a stifled breathing. It was really heavy. And it's like when you're playing hide and seek when you're a kid and your friends are right next to you. So you're trying to breathe, you're excited, but you're trying to stifle it. And I was just like, I finished the apple trap, and then I walked off to go to my car to get a camera, right? And this time I bought just one of the little clicky throwaway cameras because I wanted to see what was up in that tree, and I was thinking there's probably a Sasquatch or at least a black bear. And I see this doe prancing, literally prancing. It's a beautiful day. She's doing the whole Pepe Le Pew skunk prancing thing. And I was like, I'm going to take a picture of this really quickly. And she freezes and looks at me because I'm in my army camouflage fatigues. And she looks down at my hands and notices there's no gun or bow or anything like that, just a camera. And I think she's seen enough hunters to recognize I wasn't the threat. And she starts prancing around the same trees I was just at. And I go around to get a better picture of her. And just as I was about to click the photo, she looks up to the tree where the breathing was coming from. She stopped dead in her tracks, looked up, her eyes just went wide, and she dropped her ears, spun around, and then just bolted. She's looking back at what's up in that tree and not knowing what she's running at. She was that terrified, and she was running at me. And I had to jump out of the way so I wouldn't get bowled over by a doe. And as soon as I looked, and when she was running, I hear this, I mean, something like 700-800 pounds just fell out of the tree and landed on the ground. And I turned, and I see this thing just drop behind the hill. And I raced to the hill because it's a large slope that goes down about 70 yards. And then there's just nothing but like fern bushes. And then there's the tree line. And most of the trees right at that area are about 10, 15 foot tall saplings, pine trees. And and when I got there, I looked up to the tree line, and I see this big black mass that is tall as those trees just barreling into them. And it wasn't a bear because it wasn't on its forelegs, because that's how bears run. And this thing was fully upright, and its shoulders had to been, at least 4 feet wide at the most, or not the most, but just at least that. This thing was massively huge. That was one of the other encounters I had, which was pretty trippy in my point of view. About a quarter mile to the south of that, me and my son at that time I was explaining how to do some tracking here and there and stuff, and showing them what kind of bushes and what kind of things, plants that are around that deer would eat, bears would eat, stuff like that. And this area has been known for also people shooting guns. And we hear this gunshot, right? And I was just like, what the heck was that? And then all of a sudden, from the tree behind us, we hear this boom, 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 running away from us. And I was with my son, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to go chase the Sasquatch, because I knew it was probably one, but he was young enough. I still didn't want to do anything. So that was one of the possible encounters. A year or so later, he got older. He had a friend, so I took them down to I think it was the Blue School Mountain area. It's now no longer dense tree land and stuff. It's overgrown with houses and stuff. And I took them to this area to teach them how to track animals. And as we're going along, I'm explaining, if you guys see bears, don't overreact, get near me, blah, blah, blah. If you see elk or deer, don't piss off the buck, because they will stomp on you and headbutt you. And if there's a Sasquatch, do not scream and point. Right? I iterated that to him so much. And I left a big pile of dried cranberries near our van, just so I could possibly get some footsteps or footprints and stuff. And we walked off, and then we were coming back an hour later, and I just felt there was this presence around us, that when I go camping, I don't carry guns. I usually carry a sword and a taser. Right? Because with the taser, you could clack it in the air, and I've driven bears away from me instantly with those things, because they can feel the electricity in the air, and everything knows what lightning is, and they run away. And so I pulled out my sword, and I started walking ahead to make sure the coast was clear. And that's when I hear my son's friend, Russell, "Greg, there it is." And he points, and I'm seeing this black mass disappearing into the saplings, right? And this thing's at least 8 feet high. And I do not know what came over me, but I just charged right at it. It was instant chasing this thing, because it was near my kid. And the parental instinct just kicked in, right? So I went charging in, and I realized after about 20 feet in that, oh God, I just left my son on the road back there, the little dirt road. And I look behind me, and here he is right on my butt. And he has this camping knife I got him that's like about 18 inches long, the blade is, that was like a scimitar shape. And he has that thing out like a sword. He's chasing me, and he told me if anything would have attacked me, he would have just instantly came in at it. So I thought that was pretty cool. But I break through the tree line, and there's a ditch running alongside the road where, like, when water runoff goes, that's the way it goes. And it's about a 20-foot distance from where I was to the actual road. And I look over and I could see that something had literally landed, like 2 gigantic feet, like a broad, like when you're doing the running jumps in track. It just 2 feet landed and the dirt was still going, and I could hear it thump, thump, thump off into the bushes. That was another sighting. Then there was one where I got word from some people about the guy and his buddies used to go hunting in this certain area until a bunch of Sasquatches scared them out of the area. And these guys go bear hunting all the time. So it's just, okay, awesome, I'm going to go that way. So I take these young 18-year-old kids with me, and I was like teaching them about all sorts of things. And we went up, found like this fallen tree area that was like an island inside these like 30-foot deep blackberry bushes. Anyways, there was like about 8 deer that looked like they've been dismembered, the bones gnawed on, and they were in different stages of decomposition, right? And so we're like, oh, that's pretty trippy. So I grabbed a couple of bones to take to a biologist. And then on our way back, right, we hear this thumping sound because we're actually on a concrete road, a forest road, and there's a hill to the right of us, like a berm about 25 feet high, and I can hear something paralleling us, and these are large bipedal footsteps. So I told the guys to stop for a second. They stopped. We kept walking, then stopped. The footsteps stopped. So that kept on for a while till we got to the car, and then everybody's taking their cigarette break, and I have my video camera, and I'm filming this huge clearing that they had just tree cutted a couple of weeks early. And I looked down, and apparently there was a young Sasquatch, probably 15 years old, like kicking back behind one of these stumps, using it as like a pillow. And it got up and peered over the stump to see what was all the noise. Because apparently a lot of these creatures have no clue what a human is. It freaks them out just as much as it does us. And it sees us, and I was just like, I turn around and I go, okay, guys, don't freak out. Don't look all over the place. But there's a Sasquatch behind that stump. And they all looked. And when I looked, it's no longer there. We went down there, and it's no longer there. So it must have probably slinked off and bolted or something, because it was gone. It was like a couple weeks later, I took those same guys and girl to just a couple of miles south of Odell Lake in Oregon. So it's, say, about 30 miles east of where we were at Myrtle Point. And so I'm teaching them more about tracking and stuff. And there was like this big termite-ridden log just sitting there. And so I wanted to explain to them how like a Sasquatch would get at the termites comparative to a bear, right? I'd say a bear would just rip open the thing with its claws and then just lick up the termites as it goes. Whereas Sasquatch would probably rip out a chunk with its hands and then use sticks to lure them on and then eat them. And then I'm explaining the tree fall. Like all those people who have, this is a Bigfoot home. That's just natural tree fall. I've seen it so many times, and they're not actual Sasquatch homes. Okay. And I'm like explaining how like the differences of markings, and like how you could tell that one Sasquatch had went through and was smashing down trees on one area comparative to the rest were all natural tree fall and weathering, and winter had waited. And we hear this behind us. And I turned and looked, and there's this about 3.5 foot Sasquatch standing there in these manzanita bushes, just looking at us, like completely oblivious to what we were. And he's completely curious. And I was like, guys, and they all looked too, and it realized we were staring at it. And it didn't dive, but it squatted behind the bushes. And as a little kid, it's still curious and still wanted to see what was going on. So it was kind of like peeking over the top of the bushes, but we could still see the top of its head easily. And then one of the guys, Noah, did the old stupid thing from the Ghostbusters movie, the original, where he yells, "Get it," to the ghost. That's what he tries to do to this creature. Now it yells out the large whooping sound, really loud for such a little creature. And that's when we hear this thump coming over the hillside. And I realize that is a pissed off parent, and we are all going to die. So I grabbed the guys and just started throwing them basically towards the car and saying, "Run." Because that's the last thing I wanted to be able to explain to a sheriff is, yeah, they got stomped by a Bigfoot. We all ran down to the car, got in the Bronco, and then drove off. So they were explaining how heavy the footsteps were, the rest of the people where we lived. And the fat guy that was with us, he's like a good 400 pounds. And it was amazing how fast he ran. I will tell you that right now. But he's trying to like jump up and stomp up and down and stuff like that. And he didn't even get close to the sound of the weight. Then one of the other incidences I was going out and I was going on my way to investigate another Bigfoot site. And I had to stop and urinate. So I was driving along and I see this little clearing in the trees right alongside the road. And I pulled my Bronco off the road. And this is like a dirt forest road. And there's a little outcropping cliff right there. And I was like, okay, I'll just pee off the cliff. No big deal. And so I decided, as I started to urinate, and the cliff is probably about 15 feet down. And then it's a slope, a good 60-degree slope for another 150 yards. And that's another forestry clearing where they had cleared out the logs and trees and stuff. And as soon as I started peeing, I heard, "Ah!" Literally, that was the sound. And I'm like, oh, I think I peed on something. And I look down, and here's this Sasquatch all pissed off and looking at me like, "You just peed on me." And it was like just a split second, and then we both realized what we were looking at. And the creature, the Sasquatch, forced himself against the cliff so he couldn't be seen. And I'm sitting there, and I basically just stopped urinating because of what that just happened. And I moved to the left, and like I said, it's kind of like an outcropping, and it sees me, and it shoves over to the right side. And I'm like, oh, I got to go get my video camera. And that's when I started hearing the loud whooping sound. And I looked to my right or my left as I turned to go get my camera. And here's another Sasquatch running up the hill. And this one is a very slender one, probably about 5 feet tall. I'd say maybe 200 pounds, right? And I know it's not the one down below the cliff because I just had turned. And I was running towards the car, realized that I had not finished taking care of myself. So I had to do that really fast. And that's when I hear this. It sounded like King Kong running down the mountainside towards me in my vehicle. And it was like no roaring or anything, just stomping and smashing trees. And I was like freaking out, and I drove away. That one was a very intensive experience on that one. Okay, and then, geez, what was that other one? Talking about those ones just made me forget that last one. But anyways, is there any questions you got?
Yeah, absolutely. My goodness, Greg. That's some amazing accounts.
And that's not even the other paranormal stuff I had to deal with.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure that there's other stuff. If you're experiencing this stuff on the Bigfoot side, there's probably a lot of other stuff too. When you had your 10-year-old experience, what year was that approximately?
1980.
Okay, cool. Great. About your experience with you and your buddies, Greg and Sean, Have you or them ever gone through any hypnosis to try to unlock what happened that night?
No, actually, I never have, but I've been wanting to think of, I was like trying to think about maybe I should. But as I think about it now, I think I know what had happened. But I actually have not gone through hypnotherapy to get the memories unlocked.
Gotcha. Have you talked to either of those friends later on in life as adults?
No, I lost contact with Sean as soon as he left Colorado because I was a young boy, and his dad was so upset with us. He's like, "What'd you guys do to him? He demanded to go back home immediately." And I was just like, I tried to explain to him what happened, and he basically took it like a grain of salt. He was just like, okay. And then Greg, his family had left Colorado for a few years. He came back when I was like about 16, and then I tried to talk to him about it. And he's like looking at me like he's upset, pissed off. He's, I don't know what you mean. I don't want to talk about that kind of attitude. I just dropped it from there, and that was it with him. And then I lost contact with him when I was about 17 because his family moved out of Colorado again.
Gotcha. When you were walking that girl home, was that on Crystal Hill Boulevard in Manitou Springs?
I think so. It was, let's see, it was very dimly lit. It was the one main road that kind of went up, and I was about half mile to a quarter mile up the hill from when it turned off from Manitou Springs Boulevard.
Gotcha. Yeah, because if you look at a map of it, it looks like that one road goes right up into the woods, and there's even a trailhead at the end of it. It goes all the way up, and we've been up to some of the cabins that are up there. And if I remember, there was like a pond up there, and this is all before the actual trailheads and stuff. Manitou has definitely changed a lot since I was last there. It's just some of the things I grew up with aren't there anymore, or buildings now cover up half the mountain, and so I'm just like, okay. Gotcha.
Like the cog railway's gone, but they left the stairway.
Oh, nice. That's weird. What campus specifically of Central Oregon Community College was that?
It was the one in West Bend. So there's a city called Bend, Oregon, and it was on the western side of it. And at that point in time, that was the west of the city. There was no buildings or houses west of that. Now there's all sorts of communities out there. It just, geez. But we just called it was the Central Oregon Community College. But I think there was a Circle K. You went off of, what was that road? Oh, not Kingston, not Newton. I think it started with an N. But you would drive down that road, and there was a Circle K, and then you took a right, and it's a road that goes up a hill. And then that's where the community college was. And you went through the college area on that one road, and there was an apartment complex called the Regency Apartments. And that's where me and my friend lived.
Gotcha. And what year would that have been approximately?
That was, I think, 1988.
Gotcha. Okay. And then we mentioned Marcola for quite a bit, which has come up on the show at least once. I talked to a older individual about, he had similar things happen. So everything that you mentioned about Marcola, I was like, yeah, this totally tracks. It's out in the sticks, right? North of.
When I was out there, it's like northeast or northeast by east of Eugene, Springfield, about, I think it's 15 miles or something like that. It takes you a while to drive out there. And like, I used to talk to my friend, and their neighbors, their dogs would be barking and barking because they'd hear something in the creek. And when it gets closer, the barking stops, and then the whining starts. And we had one evening where me and my friend were in his house, and we're talking, and he has to take his pit bull outside because the dog is not well human trained at all. It'll tear up dogs, it'll tear up a bear, it'll tear up humans if it can. They trained it to be literally a hyper aggressive attack dog. So when we come over, he has to go put it in its cage. It's not like a small pen. It's like a 15 by 15 foot fence that's about 10 feet high, right? Just chain link fence. And we're sitting there watching the show, and all of a sudden you hear all the dogs start barking, right? And then all of a sudden you hear his dog barking, and then instantly goes to a yelping whine, like he is terrified. The next thing you know is you hearing him trying to scramble over the chain link fence. And then we hear the stump, and then he's scratching at the door. So he was terrified. I did have one other encounter down in Phoenix, or not Phoenix, but Cave Creek, Oregon. I don't know if there's a Sasquatch or not. There's a lot of weird paranormal areas that were down in the area. And me and two other friends or four friends were actually camping. It was me, Tim, and Jason. And we were down at the base of this thing called, what was that canyon called? Christopher Creek, I think, is what the actual creek was, because there was all these waterfalls that you can do. You can cliff jump off and stuff, and that's why we go there. And we were camping in one area by there, and my friend Tim, the second Tim, actually had about a 200-pound chow. Now, this dog was not afraid of anything. He would go after javelinas. He'd go after anything, and he was a big, tough dog. And we're sitting all in the tent talking and stuff, and next thing we know, we hear this kind of like thumping sound around the tent. But it was in the good distance away. And that's when the chow just busts right through the tent and starts hiding behind his master and trembling and whining. So that was it for that one. But continue with your questions.
So that's very interesting, because before you brought that up, literally like half a second or half a minute, I had written down, ask about Green Peter Reservoir, which is in the same area, but it's further out than Green Peter.
In Arizona?
No, were you talking about Cave Creek, Oregon?
No.
Oh, you were talking about Cave Creek, Arizona.
No, Crystal Creek, Arizona. It's a creek by Payson, Arizona.
Oh, okay.
So if you drive up from Phoenix and you go to Payson, there's a main road. You take right going east, and it takes you east, and then there's a road, like it was a dirt road, that take you off and down into the mountains or down to the creek. But now, when you look at the maps, it's kind of filled with houses and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So that's actually closer to the Grand Canyon, it looks like.
Actually, I don't know. Yeah, let's see. Where was Grand Canyon compared to Phoenix? Because it's like you go up out of the actual, because if you've ever been to Arizona, right, you got the mountain green mountains like thing, and then you go to this edge, and it literally looks like the land just dropped a few thousand feet. Like just sheer cliffs all the way down. It goes for miles and miles, and then that's where the desert of Phoenix and all that stuff is.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Let me see here. Okay. A question I had put down about Marcola is, you had mentioned there was a history of other people in the town seeing Sasquatch.
Yes.
Are there other things then that you've heard about experiences in that area?
No, not really. I've heard of just the Sasquatches from the few of the people I've talked to. And they're like, my friend over here, they saw one crossing their yard and that sort of stuff. But I mainly was going out there to pick him up and then going up to the Weyerhaeuser Tree Farm, which is the Shotgun Creek area of Oregon, up by Marcola, to go do my experiments and my walking around and all that stuff and research. Because like me, I was a big fan of Jane Goodall. I watched all her documentaries, read her books, And the one thing that was persistently there was her persistently going into areas before she even got to know any of the chimps and just sit there and watched and listened. And then the chimps started coming around because they grew calm and confident with her presence that she wasn't a threat. And that's basically what I kept going up there for, was to make sure that I had a calm presence and stuff. I'd bring up like a radio with didgeridoo music, different kinds of musics to try to lure animals out. And the one that lured deer out left and right was bagpipe music. Don't ask me why. I just remember playing the bagpipe music, and within 20 minutes, there's like a herd of deer coming up. What's that sound I hear? And it's just, wonder if they're like thinking, hey, that's Cousin Jed.
That's funny. How long do you think it took, let's say, using that Jane Goodall method of just hanging out in an area before you started to have some activity, if any?
Most of them were me just driving up into that area over and over again. And the spread of the areas themselves, I would say, was probably a few square miles. But they were like different. I mean, they had to be different Sasquatches because the size and the proportions of them, what they look like. Oh, there was one other sighting that I did forget to mention, and that was the day I saw another one, but this one was so fast. It was incredibly fast. And I had camouflaged my Bronco, like with Army camo, and I'm driving up the road, and there's this Sasquatch sitting on the side of the road, and it's like a 3-foot berm that he's on, and he's looking at an area where you can see it's a large deer trail. The herds go up and down. And he looks over and he sees my Bronco because it's out of the movement of his eye. And he basically didn't think about it because I had camouflaged everything. All the chrome, the bumpers, everything was Army camo. Not the new fangled digital camouflage, but the old green, brown, tan, light green, loam, that kind of painting. And I've actually driven up to where we were deer in the road, and they just stop and they're like looking at me, and then they see me as a human, and then they run off. But he just kind of took one look, didn't think about it for about a second and a half, and then he looked and noticing that the bush is driving up the road. And that's when he got up and took off and ran. And he must have did 100 yards in about 5 seconds. It was that fast. And that thing was probably a good 7 feet tall.
So you actually got to see it cover 100 yards in a few seconds. How would you describe? How would you describe the way that it was running?
There's a lot of fallen logs everywhere, and like I said, it is a lot of old growth. And because it had longer arms, it would run on its hind legs. But as soon as it got near a log, it would just like instantly kind of curl his legs up for a split second as he uses those arms to go straight over it and then instantly back. But the thing is they didn't run with their arms like what we do. If you ever see like those marathon runners where they're so exhausted, their arms are just kind of like hanging at their waist, but they're still going back and forth a little bit. And that's the way this thing ran. But it was so fast because I had raced up to where he was, and he was only about 30 yards from me. And I was in my Bronco, so I went, and as soon as he started going, I stopped and I tried to get a picture with this crappy camera that I was telling you about that was like everything's blurry. And so I got a picture of just at the back of his head. And it was that fast. It was just like so quick. It was insanely fast.
Could you notice any specific movements that were being done by its legs while it was running?
For the like second and a half that I actually saw, yeah, his legs were not like chimp feet or legs. They weren't like normal apes. These were designed for walking long periods like ours. And its legs were probably, I'd say, about 2/3 the length of their arms. And he didn't have a motion like most people say. They have this broken gait kind of thing where their legs are always bent. No, this thing was so fast. It was just like, it was gone.
A lot of witnesses will say something to the effect of it seemed to be gliding or making a gliding motion when it was moving. Was there anything like that present?
No, it was like its head didn't like bob up and down, but it was so fast and it just moved so quickly that the only thing I could think of is when like if I ran that territory, that straight line, I would have actually had to been jumping over manzanita bushes, jumping over logs and stuff like that. And this thing just went straight through them like it was nothing.
Wow. That would be fantastic to see. At any point during any of these stories, there's a few times when you mentioned like you're trying to get video or taking photos. Were you able at any point to get any video footage or photos of what you were looking at?
Well, I did have one video that I had, which was the one behind the stump. Now, here's the weird thing is about 3 days after that, apparently I forgot to lock the house. Me and my wife and kids had went out for lunch and then hang out the arcade at the mall. We came back and here's this one guy. His name was Scotty, and he's not all the way there in the head, right? But he's an extremely nice person and very trustworthy, right? And he's got like a split personality issue, but he's like sitting right in front of my house on the curb. And I was like, what's up, Scotty? I came over to talk to you. I knocked on your door. Before I knocked on your door, I seen your door open. I didn't go inside. I wanted to know if you were home. So I said, are you there, Greg? But you weren't home. So I decided to sit here and make sure nobody got in your home. And I was just like, oh, okay. So we instantly, me and my wife walked in and started looking at all the valuables. TV's there. The Xbox is there. The PlayStation's there. All her jewelry's there. Nothing had been ransacked. The only thing that was gone was the one videotape that I made of the Bigfoot thing. But I do have the one photo of the one Sasquatch that ran off so fast, and I got the back of his head. Because, like I said, I had this little camera. I'm pretty sure it was called the Phaser, even though I can't find it online anywhere anymore. But this thing was a $10 POS, and you just point it and shoot. There's no focusing or anything like that. It looks like a little laser gun. And that is the one actual photo I actually was able to take of it. And then, yeah, it was, so I got that. But what I did was I drew and sketches of a lot of the actual incidences of what I saw. And I've been interviewed by the Southern Texas Bigfoot company or group, and I gave them the sketchings. I gave sketchings to this other film company. Then Charles Sasser contacted me because he was commissioned from his publisher to write a book about Bigfoot and the people who researched them. And he contacted me and asked if he can get an interview. So I did that and then sent him copies of the sketches as well. And then there was another 2 people that interviewed me for YouTube that I did as well. And so I'm willing to send you the copies of those sketches and the photo if you want.
Yeah, I would absolutely love that. I think that would be cool to put in the YouTube version. I don't know if you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Awesome.
Like I said, the more people know, the better it is. Now, I do have a few suggestions for the people who are researchers now and people who are wanting to research. One thing is get yourself a 360 camera. Stop relying on cell phones. Stop relying on just normal video cameras, because when you're moving that video camera around and that Sasquatch sees you pointing at it, it might think it's a weapon or something and hide. But now if you actually have a 360 camera, like the one I have is an Insta 360 X3. They got better versions now. But what it does is it shoots film in two 180-degree camera angles, right? One on the front, one on the back. You just either put that on your head or you carry the selfie pole that it has. And then they got a studio that you can just have it automatically format the 360 video. And then you can go back to saying, okay, I'm starting it at this time on this date. And then let's say you heard like a Sasquatch or something, instead of you looking at it and scaring it off, you can sit there and stop, have people pull out a little bit of food or something, and then just hold the pole or set it up somewhere to where it's just watching the 360 video. And then you can go back and move your camera angle around via your screen by locking onto it and moving it around, and you'll be able to see the Sasquatch bears or whatever that's in that vicinity without actually having to turn. The other one is if you are with a large group of people, okay, you're not going to see a Sasquatch. Okay, those things are going to hear you coming and they're going to hide. They're going to leave. I think they can smell gun oil, and that's why hunters rarely see them. But the best groups to have is about 4 people. Having a female in the group as well, I think, is a very beneficial thing, because I think her voice will basically drop down their defenses, and they won't be uptight. They're like, oh, there's a bunch of hunters, and they'll be like, oh, there's a woman there, so let's check it out. But the biggest thing is if you hear a Sasquatch near you, okay, stop, sit down, relax, and then pretend to groom each other like what chimps and gorillas do, going through their hair and pretending to pick out little mites and gnats and stuff like that and eat them. And to primates, that's a mark of relaxation, like total relaxation. They're comfortable, they're relaxed in this area. So the Sasquatch is going to see that and be more relaxed, because now your guys are relaxed. And heck, you may get lucky and have one come up and lay next to you and want to be groomed itself. That would probably be a big first on Sasquatch research. But the largest one out of all is don't scream and point, because that's the worst thing you can do is scream and point, because you scare it, and then basically it's gone.
That's some great advice. The grooming advice is very interesting. Is that something that you had figured out yourself from maybe your research into Jane Goodall, or is that something that you had picked up from another researcher?
Actually, it's a combination of Jane Goodall's research, Diane Fossey's research. You probably know more of her work from the movie Gorilla in the Mist. But then also all the other documentaries I have watched where the chimps or gorillas, orangutans, any primates, even baboons, once they get to an area where they feel comfortable and relaxed, that's when they start grooming each other. And this one is helping build up bonds with each other, social hierarchy, in building up friendships and just getting those bugs out of your hair. But it's also a comforting factor. It's just like when women go to a beauty salon and getting their hair done and it's being washed and dried and relaxed. These women, and I'll tell you the truth, I've gone to a couple of the salons and with my wife and did the same thing. It's very relaxing. So this is the way that you will be able to draw Sasquatches out more, because they will be relaxed, knowing you're relaxed, you're not hunting, and they can come up closer and get a better view. Because one thing they're curious. They are very curious. So if you have a 360 camera that you're doing and then you hear this creature, if you could put it on a small tripod from between all of you guys while you're sitting there pretending to be grooming, you might get some extremely good footage.
Yeah, that is really good. That's really solid advice. That's probably some of the more solid advice we've gotten on this show. Thank you. I would love to hear if anyone ever tries that and is successful. A few locations that came to mind that are in the general vicinity of encounters that you've talked about. So maybe here at the end, we'll just throw some of them out here and see if you've ever heard anything about these areas. And if not, that's no problem. Fall Creek.
That sounds really familiar.
That's by Lowell and Winbury in Lane County.
Is that in Oregon or Washington?
Yeah, it's in Oregon. It's if you take 58 out of Eugene and then you go down to Oak Ridge area.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I've never had any sightings in that area. Like, I've talked to people before. The Bohemian Mining District, I know, has a good, rich history of Sasquatches. They're mountain ape devils, is what some people have called them. One incident, took my kid up to the top of the Bohemian Mountain. They have a fire watch tower there and a big picnic table, and we went up there a couple of different times, and the picnic table is a good 600 pounds. These logs are 6x6 or 6x4s. The whole thing is just solid. And I noticed one day when we had went up there that the table looked like it had been just completely flipped off the area onto the cave, onto almost the road below. But because if you had a bunch of people picking it up and trying to shuffle and chuck it, you would definitely see their footsteps shuffling. This looks like someone just walked up and just flipped it off. But that's not the real thing. I drove up there and I spoke at a conference in Hillsboro about the differences of species of Sasquatch, because there's not just one roaming around in America, but there's several. And I was talking to them about it, and my kids bought a Bigfoot sticker that said Bigfoot lives and put it on the back of my Bronco without me knowing it. And I didn't take it off. I was like, the kids spent their hard-earned money on one, so that's fine. And I drove up, and there was this group of people that drove up on quads. And one of the guys is about 6'7". I mean, he was a big guy. And they're all talking, and they're all standing in a line, and they're like standing side by side, and I'm talking to him. And I was just like, have any of you guys heard anything about Sasquatches around here or anything in the incidences? And they're like, why? And I was like, oh, if you notice that bumper sticker, I do research. And the guy's just, oh, I got an incident. And right before he could really say that, the others started sniggering. They're like, and he raised his hand, I will slap all of you. And they're like, oh, geez, this guy's never acted like that towards us. He's like, let me tell you something. And he was talking about one of the roads around there. I can't remember what forestry number it was, but him and his buddy drive up there like a few months before elk season and deer season so they can get a scouting of the land. And this time they drove up in his friend's ranchero, and they see this huge, gigantic, fur-covered human, solid black, covers the entire forest road in 2 steps, right? And he's like, it takes me 6 just to walk across the road. So this thing was huge. And they stopped the vehicle. They got out to go and investigate more, and he got about 50 feet into the wood line when he had this overwhelming sense of fear. And he realized that his .44 Magnum pistol wasn't going to be enough protection to protect him. So he started running back for the ranchero, and his friend was already in it and it started driving off because he was that terrified, and he had to literally dive into the back of the ranchero. Okay. Then that same day I met 2 guys just kicking back in the back of their truck and asked them about the area. And one of them giggled and the other one got pissed. He's like, dude, you don't know anything. Remember my grandpa? And he's like, yeah, he's just a World War II vet. He had an incident here, and it reminded me so much of the Albert Oatsman experience. not being kidnapped, but being chased by him. He was hunting an animal. I think the guy said it was a deer. And all of a sudden he hears these rocks being landed by him. And he sees like 4 Sasquatches, when he freaked out and fired at a couple of them. And they started hooting and chucking rocks harder at him. And that's when he started running out of the canyon. And they kept up with him for about a mile. And then he just got into his vehicle and hauled butt. But the biggest incident there was a historical record from the sheriff's department. 1960s, a biker gang robbed a gas station. And their local haunt was the Bohemian mining area. The sheriff gathered a posse together to go bring these guys to justice. And as they're driving up towards the mining district, all these motorcyclists or bikers are driving down. Now, they have stuff hanging off their motorcycles, tents. It's like some of them just drove through the tents, and these guys are freaking out. They got off their motorcycles and they ran up to the sheriff and were pleading to save them because some gigantic hairy monsters came in and attacked their camp.
That's incredible. That's Bohemian Mine area.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's all sorts of failed mines where people dig in about like 50 feet and there's nothing. So they go to another area. A lot of black bear live in there. There's a lot of deer, some pumas, some wolves, all sorts of flora and fauna for a bear to be able to eat. And also creeks to get fish out of.
Last location area I'll ask you about is, have you ever heard anything about the Union Creek or Prospect area?
The Union Creek?
Yeah, Union Creek or Prospect is west of Crater Lake.
Prospect, no, but I've heard people talk about incidences in Crater Lake or the camping areas that are surrounded.
Oh, wow.
Most of them were vague, like people are camping and they hear stick snapping and they see this large bipedal creature in the tree lines, but not really doing anything. And I've had people, ask me, people who want to do research and stuff, to look in their areas, where would be a good area to go researching. And so I scour Google Earth or the map sections and then look for areas that would be really good for these researchers to go look at. Because the best way the calculation is the less humans accessible, the better, right? If you have to hike a couple miles off of a road, the better. A lot of flora that they can eat, a lot of fauna, chipmunks, birds, good deer population, even if it's like a mountain goat population. And then adequate water sources. That's the biggest thing right there, because all life is drawn to water. So if you can find creeks, you can find not really huge lakes that much, but rivers, creeks. A lot of these places are really good hotspots to get Sasquatches. They'll eat crayfish. They'll eat any type of shellfish they can get their hands on. They'll eat chipmunks. I've read reports of people coming up and seeing these gigantic holes in the ground and all these boulders stacked up, and people couldn't understand why. And one guy witnessed these Sasquatches moving these boulders and grabbing bowls and just popping them in their mouth and just chewing them up and eating them. I researched a lot. I think I still have the map of Washington, Oregon area that I can send you as well. That is like, I did a blotter map of about 150 years worth of sightings.
Oh, wow.
Native Americans to whites and whatever, from police to researchers to campers. And so like the red ones are hostile. These are just straight up hostile sightings. They chuck rocks at people. They chase them, roar at them. But now I think there was only 6 fatalities I researched. And most of these were because someone shot at them or shot them. Then the other ones are blue, Those are semi-aggressive to passive. In other words, they see you when they run away, or they stand there and watch you, maybe menacingly growl a little bit, and then you walk off or something like that. And those are about it. So the larger the dot, the more sightings that are in that area. And some of them, one of the trippiest incidences I researched was over in Sandy, Oregon. A guy and his wife have a land out there, and they hear some gunshots off in the distance. And so the wife goes out of the door first. The husband went to go get his rifle. They go out there. He comes out of the door, and his wife was standing at the edge of their property, which is 50 yards from their house. And all of a sudden, what he sees is a gigantic, 11-foot tall, hairy man, just fur covered, looking at his wife with such intense hatred, picks her up and then throws her about 40 yards into blackberry bushes. And him and his friend actually had to have other people come out and carve a path to get her out of the blackberry bushes. I think she needed 122 stitches.
Did you actually interview this guy?
No, I didn't. A lot of these research I get from the books that have been published.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And also the Bigfoot mapping project and also the BFRO.
Absolutely.
Because I've actually talked to some of the investigators of the BFRO, and they're very intelligent. 2 of them were law enforcement, so they grill you back and forth. I trust to make sure that your story's straight.
The investigators are good. I've talked to a lot of them, but
yeah.
Wow, Greg, what has it been an incredible chat with you. Thank you for taking the time to share what you've experienced and answer all the questions that I've had. I really appreciate it. I want to make sure if there is anything that you want to have people check out, feel free to share that at this time. I don't know if there's anything.
Okay. One, me and my wife run a gluten-free lifestyle YouTube channel. And this is for people who know people are celiacs or have to be gluten-free, or they are themselves. It's Good by Gluten, and it's the word good. There's a dash, and then BYE, and then gluten afterwards. And if you pop up a YouTube channel that has an orange background-ish with some chopsticks and forks and spoons and stuff, that's ours. We do all sorts of recipes, food product reviews. And I will tell you, most of the food I've tried that were gluten-free are good. And then there's some that it's just, oh, why did my kid make me eat this? Then I also have another YouTube channel that actually has all sorts of movies, video gaming, but it has me talking about my encounters of Sasquatch with the actual maps of the area and with the sketches and photos, the actual areas that I did. And the YouTube channel is called Chaos Entertainment, and that's CHAOS and then Entertainment. But there's a couple of them. Mine's the oldest, but you have to look for the ones that have green and yellow lettering and a space-looking weird background. And that's mine. Let's see, what else is there? There's links to my books and my artwork that are there, because one of my actual books is called Scions of Michael, and there's actually Sasquatches in there, a ton of them actually. Michael the Archangel comes down to Earth to protect the new Mary, ends up meeting a family of Sasquatches, and then leading an army of Sasquatches into Seattle, all adorned with angelic armor and weaponry to fight demons and monsters. So it's a pretty good book for a good read.
That's awesome. We'll have to link that for sure in the show notes.
Yeah, because you can buy that on Amazon or order it out from Barnes & Noble.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
actually have a couple other Bigfoot books out there that are one's a short story. I just forgot what the book was called. It's linked up in my Amazon page. Okay. And that actually has a Sasquatch story. Let's see. And I think that's about it for right now. I've been pretty busy working on my new caramel corn company, so But I'm tending to get back out into research as soon as I can, because the only reason why I stopped it was because I got really sick from my allergies, and my immunity system got so compromised that literally I was bedridden for several months.
Oh my goodness.
And so I couldn't leave the bed. I was wanting to just die because I felt so horrible. And that's how I got celiac, and we had to be gluten-free. And then I moved up to Washington, got healed up a lot better. So now I'm ready to take my youngest son out, who's now 25, and go do researching and stuff like that. And got a lot more equipment. I got myself a nice drone, 360 camera. Hopefully my drone won't get attacked by one video I saw where the dude's drone's flying over, and all of a sudden you just see this giant stick just fly up and hit it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just about. I hope that doesn't happen.
Greg, thank you so much. Definitely, listeners, check all that out in the show notes. Keep us in the loop if anything else does happen in the future. Greg would love to hear about it. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. And text me that email so I can send you all that.
Absolutely. Before we wrap this episode, I want to say something directly to a very specific group of listeners. If you're in the military, any branch or forces, and if you've seen something that no one can explain, or if you're a national park ranger or forestry worker who's been told to stay quiet, or if you're a pilot who's seen something strange down on the ground, or if you're with the FBI, a federal agency, or working intelligence, and you stumbled upon something you're not allowed to talk about, and if you're a firefighter, paramedic, or search and rescue responder who's heard screams or found tracks that didn't make sense, if you're in the logging industry, on a remote oil field, or a trucker with government contracts, and you've had something happen that you've never told a soul, and if you're a biologist, a wildlife specialist, or a field researcher under contract who has found evidence you're not allowed to report, if you're a pastor, a missionary, or someone on a spiritual retreat, and you saw something that shook your faith, or if you work in the shadows, CIA, NSA, or anything with clearance, and you've seen what the public hasn't, then I want to talk to you. Even if it's anonymous, you can reach me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. The world needs to hear what you've been forced to carry alone, and you're not alone. You've got the story. We've got the mic. See you in the woods. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all of that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.